Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. Our panel is going to be on career pathways, and we have a very distinguished and diverse panel to talk about their career journeys today. My name is Emily Almond. I'm an executive director at Willis, Watson, a global people and risk advisory firm. I will briefly introduce everyone, and then they're going to further introduce themselves. So with me, I have Tara Alhadeff, Uniti, Bhalla, Harry Briggs, and Kolade. And I'm going to hand over to Tara first to introduce herself more formally and go down the panel from there.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Emily. So I'm Tara Alhadeff. I work at Permira, private equity firm, at the larger end of things. I've been at that firm for 10 years. I've spent all of those 10 years on the investing side of the business and focusing on consumer-facing companies, so retailers, e-commerce businesses, brands. And delighted to be here this morning.
Morning, I'm Kolade. I'm the managing partner of Livingbridge. I've been in private equity for 25 years and been running Livingbridge for about 20. Livingbridge is a leisure market firm focused on the sort of smaller end of the private equity industry, but fast-growing service-based companies.
Hi everyone, I'm Harry Briggs. I'm a partner at BGF Ventures, which is a UK-focused early-stage tech investing fund. Previously I was at Balderton Capital, so I guess I've been in VC now for coming up for 9 years. And previously to that I started a drinks company that a few of you might have come across called Firefly Tonics.
Morning everyone, I'm Uniti, Bhalla. I'm a managing partner at Star Capital, currently investing our third fund, which is focused on what we call strategic assets. I'm happy to tell anyone what a strategic asset is later, but it covers a multitude of sins. Before that, investment banking, and before that, a geneticist and microbiologist.
Thank you. And so during our sort of pre-call on the panel, we discussed a lot of sort of interesting sort of things that have happened throughout your careers. What do you think has been the most sort of pivotal moment in your career to date? And I'll start with you, Tara, as you're next to me.
Okay, so the most pivotal is a difficult thing to select. But I'll tell you about a pivotal thing, and particularly in the spirit of this conference. I received coaching, formal professional coaching, about, 6 years ago or so, about 4 years into my time at Permira. And it's a slightly unusual thing to say as being really pivotal. I'm not talking about a deal or a promotion or an opportunity to work on something or with someone, but it's true. So the coaching was, I asked for it. And I asked for it because I noticed that the way I was working and presenting myself was different to some of my colleagues. And it just, a specific event kind of led me to realize this, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I raised my hand and I said I'd really like some coaching on my communication style and influencing and specific things. And 6 one-hour sessions that the firm kindly supported, and I'm very lucky to work for a firm that supports that, I have found genuinely kind of, changed how I operate. Not in a dramatic way, but in a way that at the margin I think makes a big difference to my ability to be effective in my firm and outside my firm. And so, particularly in the context of today's theme, different people work in different ways, and I found getting a little bit of professional help on some small things has been, with hindsight, really pivotal.
That's really interesting, and that helps you think about how other people were responding to you as well, sort of during the coaching sessions. It was specifically on communication that you were doing it on, or?
It was to do with communication and influencing.
Okay.
And I don't know how many people in the room or on the panel have done coaching before, but it's amazing what it can shine a light on. Just a few really honest, open conversations just bring you, certain things to your attention that you're probably not thinking about, and can be really transformational.
I just say, great, the firm can support you on that as well. So good to ask, I suppose, is a message there as well.
Yes.
To ask for things. And moving on to you all.
A couple of things. I think it's difficult to isolate it to just one. The first would be actually my father. He basically said there's absolutely nothing you can't achieve, but remember, because you're black, you have to work twice as hard. Second was actually been given the opportunity to run Livingbridge, or rebuild Livingbridge, because it was a total mess when I took over, which is why I got given the keys. Being sort of young and relatively stupid and not knowing what I couldn't do, I just sort of charged off and went for it anyway. And sort of, I don't know, years later, it seems to be going okay.
Gosh, I would say it was probably my sort of early 20s when I'd been on the kind of classic insecure overachiever sort of Oxford McKinsey track, and decided to leap off and do a startup, despite not being that sure that this was the right startup, but being reasonably sure I wanted to work with my co-founder. And obviously, it wasn't probably a coincidence that about the same time I came out as gay, and that was, if anything, even more scary. And suddenly it sort of felt like, wow, I can actually, I don't have to sort of play by these rules of, you've got to kind of get to this level by this year, and sort of always comparing yourself against your peers, and slightly sort of competing and so on. You can actually, forge your own path in your own life and take risk, and there's an amazing sort of joy that comes from doing that. And I guess that's also what's sort of then led me into venture capital, that is sort of sharing and championing those entrepreneurs that are on those sorts of journeys is fantastic.
Yeah, and very rewarding. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And for me, it was moving from investment banking to a firm that hadn't raised any money, that had a first-time strategy in an industry I'd never heard of private equity. Didn't know what it was, and it was really quite fun to do that. And that was the biggest risk, but also the biggest pivotal moment in my career, when I realised it didn't matter what age or how much knowledge you actually had that was super relevant. As long as you had confidence and skills and belief in yourself and a good culture around you, you could succeed. And here I am, almost 20 years later.
Thank you. So I think one of the other things that we discussed previously, and I think is quite a hot topic in the industry at the moment, is mentoring and coaching, and the availability of building those relationships. So it would be interesting to hear, who have been your key influences in your careers. Well, you mentioned your father earlier, but other people that have inspired you, and how you've nurtured those relationships, and how you've used those sort of mentors, or not necessarily mentors, people that have been sort of positive influences during your careers. And I'll go the other way around now. So Uniti, I'll start with you.
I have to say, I think I've so many people that I've learnt from, and they've all been different things that I've learnt from them. So I actually would never pick one. My family's been super important as a sort of solid base to always be there. My husband has really supported all the changes I've made to my career as well. But I think I've learnt from so many people along the way, and I think even if you don't particularly admire everything about someone, you can usually find something very good to learn from them. So today I would say I consistently go back to those same people, but also just keep adding new ones, whether they be portfolio company managers, the newest recruit in my firm, the most junior person. I just feel you always learn. So no one in particular.
I'd say there have been a few times in my career when I've sort of felt like I was at rock bottom, and someone has sort of, I don't know, believed in me and picked me up and made me kind of, get back on track. And, that was definitely true the first few months at McKinsey. It was sort of, incredibly dull work, and, a couple of managers that I just found incredibly frustrating to work with. And suddenly, funny enough, Charlie Mayfield, who's now obviously running John Lewis, sort of, agreed to take me on a project, and was just such an inspiring leader and manager and motivator, and that it sort of made me think, wow, this is actually a job that I can perhaps do and enjoy. And I think similarly, the whole sort of coming out process, there were one or two people because, when you're sort of outside that world, and it seems very, very frightening, you sort of think, oh, there's, the gay world looks really weird and distant. And by the way, this is a long time ago. I'm quite old now. It was, there were certain people, like, for example, Robin Pembroke, who's now leading BBC News Online, who were both sort of mentors, but also inspirations, if you like, of, role models, perhaps. And certainly in the venture capital world, I remember a few months into that, and I think this is a feature of our industry, that you get very latent feedback in venture capital and probably in private equity. And so you can spend the first few months feeling like you're in completely the wrong industry, you're completely terrible at this, that you're about to be fired. And particularly, I had an early manager there who was, slightly bullying and really unpleasant to work with. And then I was sort of again plucked up by one of the other, partners called Mark Evans, who is a mentor to a lot of people and, incredibly brilliant, but also incredibly good at making you feel like, your opinions do matter and you can take risk and, this could be a career for you. So yes, I think that, definitely, I sort of struggle. It's sometimes scary to think how my career might have panned out without certain people like that.
A bit like Uniti, where it's difficult to sort of figure out one person, because there's a series of people at different moments, and actually the moments really sort of stand out for me, and there's too many to mention now. Having said that, if there's one constant, it's been a lady called Alison Carnworth, who used to chair until very recently, well, she still chairs Landsec. And Alison, I first met in 2000, and it was one of these, we were introduced by someone who knew her, someone who knew me, and she didn't really want to get involved with the private equity business, especially one that had no money, was run by a sort of 32-year-old. And we had, she agreed to have a telephone conversation with me just before she was going on holiday. And she said she had 20 minutes. 3 hours later, we're still on the phone. And when I was trying to explain to her what I was trying to do, etc., she was just fascinating in the way she probed and questioned. And she said, I'll give you an answer when I come back from holiday. And she came back from holiday and joined our board. And it was the first time she joined a board of anything where she did not know the people. She always knew the people beforehand. And it's the longest place she's been anywhere in her entire career. So it must have been good. But she's been really inspirational, really there at moments where you can't quite see what to do, or else you're sort of in danger of being complacent. She's been a really good force for change, force for good, actually.
And what do you think her decisions were in joining the board, if that was her first?
I don't know.
Did she come? But what happened on holiday?
Well, I think, to be honest, I think after the conversation, which she was trying to pack to leave on holiday, and she didn't manage to do that all that well. She, I don't know, we had a spark. We had something happened where basically we connected, and it's a connection which has been maintained for approaching 20 years. I've known her, and I know her really, really well, all through, the Barclays issues she had, being appointed one of the first FTSE 100 chairmen. She's a friend as well as a mentor, as well as a sort of inspiring person. She has had an extraordinary life in what she's done. And I admire what she's done, and I admire her. She's just been able to help me sort out things, bring clarity to sort of fog of what we're doing, and just basically say, of course you can do it.
Shows you've got to be open-minded to those relationships. And Tara?
So when I think of mentors, there's kind of people I've benefited from as formal mentors that my firm has allocated to me, or actually level 20. I was part of the first level 20 mentoring scheme. And actually I'm having lunch after this with my level 20 mentor. So there's the formal ones, which have variously been beneficial or been neutral. But then what I think is really powerful is the relationships that spring up organically, like Wal just described. where there's kind of neither rhyme nor reason about why it happens, and it's only with hindsight that you articulate that the person is a mentor figure to you. And I think those are the really amazing ones that are difficult to plan for or make happen. But one thing I was reflecting on when we talked about this before is you need to be open to those relationships, as you just said, and you really need to be looking for them and be hungry for them. And one thing I said when we were talking before this in the group is that I've noticed, and I noticed this in myself, some people are very much disposed to finding those relationships. They're extroverted, they love building connections with people, and they seek out those kind of relationships. And the minute they find someone who's willing to give them time and advice, they grab it and they're hungry and they take more. And other people are more introverted and find it hard to make those connections, even if they want them. And I'm probably somewhere in the middle, which is why I'm making this point. But when I look back in time, the people, those kind of organic, informal mentors are people where I've actually stepped a little bit out of my comfort zone to chase that relationship and invest a bit in it, and call them up if I'm in their neck of the woods. The person I'm thinking of is in New York, or go out of my way to make sure they, find time, and it just blossoms, and you have to kind of, and I think that's both a message I want to give to people who are at the mentee end of the relationship, but also at the mentor end, and for organizations to be aware that some people build those relationships more easily than others. And I think as an industry, we should make an effort to make sure we're helping the people who don't naturally make those connections get the best out of mentoring relationships.
Being mindful and proactive.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I've got lots of questions coming in now. So I'm going to, I don't want to disappoint the people asking the questions, so I'm going to include one now. So this is sort of on a similar vein to what we've been discussing in relation to mentors and people. So in relation to networks, so it says networks are very important for career pathways. How can people who are not already part of an existing network bridge that gap? So are there any recommendations that you guys have in your own experiences where that you would give people for that who aren't in a network on how to find a network and what they should be doing proactively on that?
I think the way I look at this is at sort of the individual level. One of the best bits of advice I got from someone was about networking, and it's a skill which you can be taught. And what they said was the most difficult thing people find about networking is entering a conversation. And the answer basically is to take responsibility for both entering and leaving that conversation. And that way, you actually are in control. And it was the most wonderful piece of advice, because if you've got a bunch of people talking and they all know each other, you can enter that conversation, you can be part of it, but you have to take responsibility to actually enter it, to be part of it, and similarly to leave as well, if it's not giving you what you want. I think just these base skills you can build up, and over time, networking will be very, very straightforward, or better.
Yeah, I completely agree. And just to link it back to something I said earlier, I actually think there are plenty of people who are part of networks and don't get much out of them. And there are plenty of people who are not in networks and build amazing relationships and connections. So I actually think it's more to do with you and taking responsibility for relationships and finding ways to make connections with people. What are networks? They're just groups of people, and people like human connection. And if you can find your way of being a connector, I think your own network will come.
And it doesn't have to be in big groups. It can be individual connections rather than en masse.
I was just going to say, I think one of the things that's really great is that you actually have a massive network of people today that you interact with, and those people will grow with you as you grow in your careers, and as you do that, you will all become more senior in organisations. So I think it's amazing if you look around what the people that you interact with just today. And don't worry too much about forcing it sometimes. I think people get very, very sort of obsessed about, I must be part of this network or that network. It's there. Just be open and take it and have a normal relationship. I mean, that's a network, really. It's not just, I need you for something specific. that might be the reason why you connect with someone, but stay in touch. And I think Tara mentioned it earlier. It doesn't have to just be one way. So, just take those opportunities and build that network around you.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back to when I was entering the VC world and went to the first couple of, tech events. And I'd been an entrepreneur, but I hadn't been part of the tech world, really. And it was really scary and overwhelming and, sort of tentatively everyone seems to know each other and I don't. And I think it is about finding the one or two people initially that you click with that sort of help you, get into that group, but rather than sort of going around trying to meet everyone, take lots of business cards and sort of, it's a very small number of great people that you build, meaningful relationships that sort of, and I think also there's always a danger of sort of saying, well, you're worth speaking to and you're not, from like the badge. and actually, somebody once said to me that the right way to approach, this doesn't always work by the way, but the right way to approach a sort of big event where you feel a bit not at ease is to imagine that you're the host and that you want to look after the people that are feeling a bit left out.
That's good advice, yeah.
It could sound patronizing, but it's, if you're thinking about, how can I make somebody feel good about being here because they're probably feeling uncomfortable like me, then you're probably going to do better than if you're thinking, oh, how do I come across?
Yeah, well, very good. And sort of stepping back into your firms and your sort of day-to-day lives, and we've got a few questions on this topic as well. So how do you, as individuals, try or have a positive influence on the culture within your firms, and how do you impact that, and what's your experiences been? So Tara, I'll start.
Sure. How do I try to impact the culture in my firm? So, lots of things, but the thing that's jumped out most for me that I make a big effort around and spend a lot of energy on is I have 2 small children, and I have a husband who works as hard as I do. So, like probably lots of other people in this room, that's a gigantic juggling act. And I make a gigantic effort to be open about the fact that, I want to be a good parent as well. And that really matters to me as much as my career, obviously. But I'm very open about it. I talk about it. I leave the office earlier than most of my colleagues. If I'm sneaking off to a school event, I try not to sneak and I say it. And things like that. And it's just my little way of trying to, send the message in our organization that we all want to be balanced people and have balanced lives, and in a generally male-dominated environment where it's just a fact that most of the men I work with at a very senior level don't have partners that are working in full-time careers. That's just a fact. Not all, but most. But most people want to have balanced lives, and even if they don't have the same struggles, they have other struggles. So everybody, I think, wants to have a balanced life, but I don't find many people going out of their ways to send the signal in the organization that you actually have to work hard to do that. So in my little way, I try to do that.
And do you think that's been met positively when you've been more open about it, or you're still waiting to see?
I think it's generally met positively. Nobody says anything negative, but I do occasionally hear barbed comments that come back to me indirectly about, about it. But no, I think overall it's met positively. Everybody wants their own version of a balanced life, right? Everybody wants their careers to be sustainable. Everybody wants to feel fulfilled in multifaceted ways. So I think, on the whole, people appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's my job to set the tone and culture of Livingbridge, and it's great because I had a sort of blank sheet of paper to be able to do it. So there's a lot of internal stuff, but actually what I want to just touch on is an external thing, because there's some things in our industry which reinforce the behaviors that people don't like. So one of the things my investors know that I rail against is attribution. I can't bear it. It's nonsense. It perpetuates I'm the star deal maker, I'm a key person, and suddenly the firm has 4 different key people. Try firing one of those because they behave badly, and try not to blow your firm up as well. So it's a really, I hope that came across, there's a really subtle one this, because actually it reinforces the behavior of people who don't behave well. So I'm constantly looking external for things that are acting against what I'm trying to do, which is to build one firm, one culture, respectful, where if someone says they're pregnant, your automatic response should be amazing, how can we help you? If that is not your response, then you've not got a culture that's right. It needs to be like that, positively reinforcing good behavior and actually making sure that we reward it. And perhaps another time I can tell people how we do that, because we have a structure to do that as well.
And how has that taken a long time to create? Is that something
Not
that
really, because actually, that's how I started. I didn't actually get set out to say, I want to work with women and more ethnically diverse people. I just went, I want the best people. I had a firm which had nothing. I had no choice, really. And then you find yourself with someone who's Indian, 3 of our senior colleagues are women, and then you sort of figure out how do you actually make sure they stay, because they're great. And then you go, wow, this is amazing. I'm fishing from a really wide pool of very different, interesting people, and we're building something quite incredible here. And you just keep making sure you remove all the blockages to ensuring that happens. And then, if you do it for long enough, you end up with what I hope in Livingbridge is a really nice firm.
When I joined BGF Ventures as a sort of founding partner, if you like, there were 3 of us, and dare I say, three white males brought in to lead this new sort of fund part of the bigger BGF. And so one of the first things that that I was really passionate about was that at Balderton, it had been a very, very male-dominated team, completely male partnership, mostly investing in male entrepreneurs, assisted by lots of women. So I really wanted to make sure that didn't happen again. So, obviously, we ended up, our first hire was a Nigerian British woman, our next hire was a Sri Lankan Australian woman, our first partner hire was an Asian woman, and they were all amazing in a number of ways. I mean, it wasn't as though that was the reason that we hired them, but we did know that we wanted to have some diversity in the team, and it became a far more interesting and better decisions were made, I think, because of that. I think the other thing I really try hard on is giving people as much autonomy, freedom, responsibility as they can handle, and constantly thinking about ways to sort of avoid doing unnecessary stuff that wastes time. And I think as organizations grow, there's always a tendency to sort of, we'll sort of keep people busy and we'll kind of, make sure that everything is done, sort of every I is dotted. And actually, what matters in venture is getting out there, meeting founders, having enough of a sort of confidence in your judgment that you can, really run with something. And so, to get to that point, you need to have done it. You need to have taken some risks. You need to have led some investments as soon as possible. And so encouraging that sort of early momentum, I think, is crucial.
Thank you.
I concur with what everyone else has said, and I think I'm part of a small fund. We never have more than 30 people in the business. Sometimes it's as low as 15, just depends which part of the fundraising cycle or investing cycle we happen to be in. The most important thing about that team is that we're all open, transparent, honest, and buy into the same team culture. And what Wal was saying earlier about star people is I completely agree with. We're a team, and we get stuff done as a team. So it's important that whoever comes and joins us has that same ethos and is willing to join in from anything, whether it's doing a bit of photocopying because someone isn't in today, through to speaking at conferences or representing the team at any type of event. So we've built a team over the years, and it has taken almost 20 years of people coming and going to get to a place where we feel today that our firm is great. It's diverse, but it's happened organically rather than trying to make it that way. Now, I'd say I really do try. So try and set by example, try and accommodate as much as we can to keep the people that we want to keep in the business. And then when we try and recruit, we now try and take from a pool of people that we see, assuming they all have pretty much the same caliber to be able to add to the skills in the fund. We will try and take them from diverse backgrounds just to add that to the firm, and that can be not just gender or colour or anything or country that they're from. It can actually be from industry as well, because sometimes that adds great diversity. So I think just being totally open to that and recruiting the best people you can, but creating the right culture in the firm.
Thank you. And so during your career, is there any advice? Is there anything that you would have done differently in hindsight, or is there any advice that you would give your younger self or people in the audience? So you've got 3 ways of answering. I'll go to you, Uniti, as you've just finished on the last one. Not much time to prepare, I'm afraid.
Okay, looking back, I don't think any decision you make is wrong. I think you should make the best of everything you do and take that decision, run with it. If it didn't work, that's okay, you've learned something from it, but be positive about it. And I think the one thing I wish I'd done differently was looked up a bit more, because I think when you're younger and you're busy trying to build your career, you tend to be very, very work focused. You know, here's what I need to do, this is what I'm expected to do. I think it's very hard, but sometimes great to just look up a bit and say, well, what else is out there and around? Am I focusing on the right things? Just always keep that in mind.
I like it. Yeah, I think generally, take more risk. I obviously wish I'd come out earlier, God. But I also wish actually that I'd probably been more open about that side of things, funny enough. When I first got into VC, I suddenly felt like, oh my God, because I'm terrified and I shouldn't be here, and this is a very macho male environment, I'm just not going to mention this, because they obviously haven't realized, and I sort of feel like that might count against me somehow. And so living this strange sort of life of like just not mentioning anything at home and who I'm going on holiday with. It's just lots of weird pronouns that non-specific, and it was exhausting. And actually, it probably would have been fine, to have brought it up. You can't completely know that in hindsight, but yes, I think probably being more open, being more open to risk as well, generally.
So a good example of something that happens very, very often and that used to really upset me, but now I don't really care anymore. My advice to my younger self is don't care about it as much. We're at a diversity conference, right? I've got a head mic on with a flesh-coloured mic, right? So I mean, this is stuff happens all the time, right? It's casual racism. I rarely meet people who are overtly racist. And when I was much younger, I was very, very angry about the whole thing. And, I'm sitting there, and for a time, I think I was the only black person in private equity in the UK, which is absurd. And it used to make me really, really angry. And I think I spent too much time being angry and not enough time reversing it and going, you know what an extraordinary privilege to be in an industry which, if you do well, rewards you really well, which allows you to interact with the most incredible entrepreneurial people in the country, the best the UK has to have, and just to be sort of calmer. Because what that did was it made me not want to talk about being a role model, so I had my head under the radar for so long, not realizing that until someone actually shamed me into it, what about being a role model for people who don't understand they can do what you do you not like doing? And actually, I would have got there earlier. So that's probably what I'd say.
So a theme that people have already touched on, but being kind of finding your authentic way of being and being being as true to yourself as you can be is something I wish. I mean, it's very cheesy and sounds corny, but I think you are best at your job and at your life when you feel comfortable in your own skin and you feel like you're doing things your way and not somebody else's way. And that's something that I didn't realize for at least the first 10 years of my working life. And it's when you realize it, it's just a no-brainer. But when I look around and I look at the people, the younger people in our organization as well, even some of the very senior people, you can tell who feels comfortable in their own skin and who doesn't, and who's thriving, and it's a direct match. I think people thrive when they feel like they're doing things their own way and are being authentic to themselves, even if that means taking a bit more risk or sticking your neck out or handling a situation differently.
Thank you. And the topic of the panel is career pathways, and so we're coming near the end, and I want to open up to the audience for anyone that does want to sort of ask an open question. But before we do, what are your current goals? So what are you looking to achieve now and in the sort of near future in your careers as you're going into that next phase? So it doesn't have to be a career goal; it can be any form of goal. But what are the current goals you're each working on at the moment?
So I actually didn't want to be in private equity first. My first and most key goal, I'm still there, was to go into space.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so I wanted to do that. That's what I wanted to do.
So you failed.
Be ambitious.
Well,
Yeah.
to be fair, I had bad eyesight, so you couldn't go on the NASA program. But I'm still working to make enough money to say to my wife, it doesn't matter that I spend the money to get the Russians to take me up. You're going to be okay.
Brilliant.
I'll go next. Okay, so my goal is to work myself out of a job and basically make sure that the next star funds have a great team that means I don't need to be there anymore. If they want me, then that's great. But if not, there should be enough people to take that on. But my other goal is really to, this is going to sound a bit cheesy as well, but is to try and give back a bit to the outside world. A bit more. I think I've been incredibly lucky from a lot of people and organisations that I've had support from, and I'd love to be able to give back a bit to people less fortunate than myself. So I'm spending a bit of time with charities in India, which is where I was born, and I love that country, and there's so many disadvantaged children there that I'm doing a bit on that, so that's mine.
Fantastic.
Well, I think in venture, and as you can probably hear, I'm sort of posh, very privileged British sort of upbringing, and but entrepreneurs come from every corner of society. There's entrepreneurial great people, and I think because there's a lot of people that look and sound a bit like me in our industry, the Oxbridge educated, high flyers that whatever, probably have much more access to venture capital than as you know, there's a terrible paucity of women being founded and ethnic minorities, but also people from Manchester and Newcastle and Edinburgh and so on, and so I think finding better ways to find those incredible potential founders that are not in the usual circles,
Not in the mainstream. Yeah.
Exactly.
This is a bit weird. It's a bit kind of like it's a bit of open therapy. I think there's only one person from my firm in the room, so I'm sticking my neck out here. Being honest, I guess my goal is to do what I just said I was doing in the previous answer, which is to find my way of progressing in my firm. And some days I think I'm doing that, and other days I think I'm compromising a lot and not doing that. And I think I'm in many ways lucky to work with people who want to help me do that, but I find that a constant, struggle is the wrong word, but I have to constantly remind myself that that's how I will ultimately, in long term, be most successful and sustainable, and this whole setup will be most sustainable. So that's a macro goal.
Very good. Thank you very much. And I think we may have time for one question, if anyone's got a burning desire. But No? Okay. Well, thank you very much to the panelists. It's been really interesting hearing your thoughts and your take on your careers. And I think some of you will be around at the lunch, so feel free to ask any questions that weren't asked during the panel. And thank you very much.
Thank you.